People of Reddit, what is your downright scariest real-life story? I was home alone when I was 11 and I had just fallen asleep. Someone tried to break in the front door, so I called the police and hid in the pantry curled up on the bottom shelf. They came to the door next to the pantry and tried to break into that door too. When the police arrived, one of them picked me up and held me until my mom got there. I'm 27 and haven't stayed home alone much since. The day I signed a lease for my first apartment, I got a dog so I wouldn't be alone. It's pretty traumatizing when you're that young. Story 2. I was riding my motorcycle on the highway, going through a major city. I was still pretty nervous about riding on busier highways, since I was still pretty new to riding. I was in one of the middle lanes when about 250 feet in front of me, a semi kicked up a plywood panel that was in the road. It flipped around, making it look like I was going to run into it like a wall. I didn't have enough time to brake or move lanes since I was surrounded by other vehicles. Luckily, another semi passed by it, which caused it to rotate, making it barely graze my elbow as I passed by it. I don't think I moved a muscle for a quarter mile, as I was in shock that I survived. Story 3. I was fully homeless for a period of time. A lot of people think homeless means hobo on the streets, but it can also mean that you're always couch surfing or staying with family. That was usually my situation, with occasional rented homes on short-term leases that I would usually end up being unable to pay for. But for about a week, I was literally homeless, sleeping on the streets and having to find cover while it rained. I didn't have much except for some coats, and I mostly slept in the tennis huts at my local public park. It was terrifying, and I really wanted to die, just to get out of it. There is a happy ending, though. I've been married and a homeowner for a while, and I'll never be in that position again. I wouldn't wish homelessness on anyone. I can understand just how scary not having a place you can call home would be. I'm glad OP is in a better situation now, and I hope that anyone else in a similar situation can make a better life for themselves. Story 4. When I first learned that some of the nicest people out there can be dealing with some terrible demons. When I was in the 3rd grade, I had a really nice math tutor. She was my mom's friend from Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the days she was supposed to come over, my mother couldn't get a hold of her. My mom got concerned and we went to check on her to see if she was okay. When we got to her place, we found her super drunk laying on the floor because she couldn't even stand. My mom called an ambulance, and later that day, my mom explained to me that she had passed away. I learned that day that no matter how good things look on the outside for some people, the demons on the inside could just be moments away from taking them. Story 5. I used to sleepwalk when I was a kid. We lived in a rough neighborhood, and I would wake up outside in the middle of the night not knowing how I got there. I had to walk home and walk into the darkened doorway I had left wide open for whoever might be lurking around. The time that scared me the most was when I was about 9 years old. I woke up and found myself with the bedroom curtains drawn back and staring out the window. As I woke, I noticed a very large and completely hairless man. No eyebrows or anything. Staring at me and slowly inching closer to the window and closer to my face. He was looking bewildered, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. I started screaming uncontrollably. I was frozen in place and peeing down my leg. The man freaked out and screamed, did a tumbling move, and then ran off in a weird zigzag like he was trying to dodge bullets. My mom woke up and thought I probably had a nightmare. The next morning, we found a screwdriver on the front porch and damage to the door jamb and door handle. I still just about pee my pants when I tell that story, but now it is usually from laughing. I will never forget the look on his face when I started coming to life and screaming, or his high-pitched scream, or his duck and roll and dodging and bobbing all the way down the street. I'd say if it wasn't for the physical evidence left behind, I would just think it was a crazy, realistic dream that OP had. As a kid, I'd get pretty vivid nightmares where I couldn't tell if they were real or not. Story 6. A year ago, I was hospitalized with an infection in my right lower leg. They drew a line a few inches below my knee and told me that if the infection spreads past that line, they'll have to amputate my leg below the knee. They pumped me full of antibiotics, and it seemed to work. I had to finish my antibiotics regimen at a nearby rehab hospital. The day before I was transferred, my roommate and I were eating breakfast. He was an older gentleman, and when he slept, he was making a weird gurgling noise. I was about to call a nurse when one ran in asking if he was okay. The guy was coding. All of a sudden, our room had nurses and a doctor running in to save this guy. It was a controlled chaos with procedures and medicines being used, being called out while one nurse kept track of everything on a laptop. I couldn't go anywhere, as I was in the bed closest to the window. They kept pushing me closer to the window, so more people could help him. They worked on him for over an hour and called the time of death shortly afterwards. The doctor asked for a moment of silence and saw me sitting up in my bed. He came over and asked if I was all right, which I said I was, even though I had tears in my eyes. Other nurses kept asking me if I needed anything. These people took the time out to see if I was okay after what I just witnessed. I asked one of the nurses to open the window a bit, as it was a sunny day and very peaceful outside the window. Even now, typing this out a year later, it brings tears to my eyes. Story 7. So, in my city there's a canal. There are several bridges crossing it, with one being a smaller metal bridge for bikes and pedestrians. I was around 10 years old at the time, and my brother and I went over the bridge first, colliding into each other. My brother fell on the path, but I was too close to the edge and went through a gap on the side. The bridge itself was only like a meter over the water, but I remember losing control over myself. I was splashing in the cold, dark water, fighting for dear life. I couldn't swim, but I somehow was able to grab one of the metal bars slightly and held on tight. Panic is the only way to describe what I felt. All this happened in a couple seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Suddenly, I heard a splash and felt my dad beside me in the water lifting me up, and that was it. Story 8. I was active duty in the Navy serving aboard a submarine. We were in port one day, and most of the crew had already left. Me and the guys on duty for the night were given permission to bring our kids on board for dinner. Halfway through the meal, someone made an emergency announcement saying that there was light smoke in the engine room, quickly followed by fire in the engine room. We trained for this stuff religiously, so everyone was immediately taking action. The commanding officer was still there, but topside. One of our senior enlisted guys ran the kids up front to a hatch and was quite literally throwing them through as our CO caught them and set them on the deck topside. The rest of us ran toward the fire, and I saw no one grabbing a mask. I grabbed a big handful of breathing masks and followed through the hatch, where we're greeted by what appeared to be light smoke filling the entire engine room. It smelled and tasted sweet, not like smoke normally would. An oil pump had blown and filled the entire back half of the boat with atomized hydraulic fluid. A guy was moments from lighting a torch in the engine room as the casualty was called. Had it been called just a moment later, we'd have walked into an inferno. Had he for some reason not heard it called and lit the torch after we had ran in, we'd have been on fire before we could react. It turned out perfectly fine, though. We cleaned the oil that clung to all the surfaces and fixed the pump, but it was somewhat surreal, knowing just how close we were to a wildly different result.